People keep wondering what is the palette I'm using, and it is the it's called the Heritage. I've seen it by other names, but I bought it at Cheap Joe's. It's called the Heritage. And these little bead trays right here, I glued in. They, what I found, as much as I like this palette, that this big area right here, it was just too big. I couldn't mix the puddles that I needed to. It was kind of lost space. So what I did is that I found these wonderful white triangle bead trays. They're very small. They're only about 3 inches, and they're only a few bucks. They come in maybe packs of 3 or 5 or 12. They're all over the internet, so you can just kind of look. At the end of the video, what I'll do is in the text area, I will leave links to where you can find this. But when you look at this, this was kind of wasted area. So I put down these 3 trays. And with these trays, I can get really big mixing puddles. So if I'm doing like a large sky or water area, if I put a lot of water in one of these trays and come back and just be pulling out my blues, you can see how large of a puddle I can get. It's very large. So I like this large mixing area, even though it's called a sketching palette and it's got 18 wells. I really need a bigger puddle for my initial washes. I enjoy working really wet. So that's what those trays are for. They are the white triangle bead trays, and they're just about 3 inches in length on each side. And they're perfect because I can shut and open the lid, and they are shallow enough to where it doesn't interfere with the closure or the seal on this palette. So let me just show you a bit of how I set this up. Put that palette aside. Here's one that is in its original state. It's the same palette, the 18 wells. When you get one of these palettes, they have inside of them one of these trays. And folks, you know, to be honest, I haven't got a clue what they expect people to do with these trays. Being clear, they're not useful at all for mixing puddles. The paint just beads up terribly. So basically, either I throw the tray away or I keep it on the side to keep my paintbrush in when I'm painting. So keeps things from rolling off the table. So it's good for a brush tray. It's not any good inside the palette. So either toss it or just take it out. So if you look at this large area that I have now, I've got 2 smaller mixing areas and I've got this big area. The little trays, the ones that I got, you can see them here. I think it came in a pack of 12, only a few bucks, maybe $5. Got more trays than I need, but I just put them down here in the center of the palette. If you decide that maybe you want more, then you can add more of these in and you can come up with 5. But to be honest, I don't see any use for more than 3 large puddles in mixing. So, got extras. If you order them, you've got extras. Share them with your friends. The palette has a really super slick surface here. So what you want to do is take these trays with just a very fine sandpaper. Just take some of the shine off of here so you'll have a surface that isn't nearly as shiny and will have a better gripping ability. I've had these trays in my palette for quite a few months now and I haven't had them come up at all. So take some of the shine off of each one. And you'll also want to make sure that you wipe off any of the residue powder because that will interfere with its ability to adhere. So I'm going to wipe these off now. The type of glue you can use, I mean, you don't need very much. You can get something as small as one of these little tiny Gorilla super glues. I mean, there's not much in there. There's more than enough to do at least 6 palettes. Or if you happen to have epoxy laying around your house, you know, any of this will do because you don't need very much. Next, just put enough on the palette, on the little trays, the little bead trays, to just have enough gripping. So you can see how much I put in there, not that much. I'm gonna put it down in the center, go on and do the next 2 trays. Now once you do this and you set these trays up, I recommend that you leave your palette open overnight. You want the dry air to be able to get to it. If you have some pretty wet paints, the problem you're going to get into is that there's maybe enough moisture in there that it won't adhere real well. So now that I've put those inside there, let those sit overnight, and they will be just this perfect little setup for your palette. Put the lid back on your glue, of course, so it'll work if you want to use it again. Another question I get a lot of questions about is that people see that I keep my paint in this kind of neat organizer, especially as much traveling as I'm doing. It's nice to have all of my paints together in one place where I can easily find whatever I'm missing or needing to replenish on my palette. A friend of mine makes these, and they're called the original PTO paint tube organizer. So he has a nice little brochure that goes with it, and there you can see the website. They're not much money at all, and you get, I mean, I'm not sure even how many slots there are. I end up usually cutting it in half because I don't need that many. So it's a neat way to keep all of your paint easily organized. And again, I will put that in the text underneath the video if you're interested in looking this up. So it's called Paint Tube Watercolor PTO. PTO means Paint Tube Organizer.com. The bead trays that I shared earlier, they're just called white triangle bead trays. Very inexpensive, have worked very well. And the palette that I used here is called a Heritage Palette, 18 wells with the seal. And yeah, it's just super handy. It just handled all the needs that I needed for mixing big puddles when I'm painting. So hopefully this is helpful. And if you want to set it up, you've got everything you need to do it. So the trays, a little bit of sandpaper, and a little bit of glue, and you're good to go.